welcome and thanks for joining us today. We really are looking forward to a discussion on our channel here, the CC&G member webcast channel, serving a community of over 7,000 contact center and customer care folks. And we dedicate the channel to discussion, focus of discussing things. That means you all are involved versus just a presentation. My name is David Hadibus. Many of you know that I help facilitate these discussions. I'm president and CEO of CC&G, and my job is to help you, our live audience, and our member, Noel Roberts, he's the CTO and VP Marketing with AirAsia Solutions, engage today and have some fun and get some questions answered. So good back and forth. Many of you have participated in the past CC&G programs with Noel, and boy, we're happy to have him back. He's going to knock it out of the park as we talk about chatbots. Our focus today is on how to leverage chatbots to deliver excellent customer service that improves the customer experience and drives ROI. And if you're new to us, we are a professional peer network of contact center and customer care management. We've been doing this for over 27 years. So we've got a nice, solid group of folks that look to us for content and look to us to help facilitate the engagement between members on topics that are of interest. And those usually center around process improvements, staff challenges, the impact of the changing technology, and a whole lot more. So thanks for being with us today. Noel's going to lead our discussion. Really how chatbot implementation, and that's the discussion, and looking at some of the challenges facing organizations, including common pitfalls and ways to avoid them. So that's the spirit of our call today. During the webinar, as you know, we do like to take a poll question, so be ready for that. We really appreciate your participation. This one is really about your ideas of implementing a chatbot in your contact center. So if you happen to be on the industry side or consultant side, give us your estimate of where you think the market is at this moment in time. It'll be fun to see how that plays out. We'll get Noel's perspectives at the end. Also, throughout the webinar, we have our questions box. We're already getting questions. Thank you. Feel free to post your question at any time, and we'll take all the questions we can handle in our discussion today, given we're going to be working for roughly 50-55 minutes. So that's the setup for everything. Again, Noel Roberts is our discussion leader today. So welcome back, Noel. Thanks for taking time with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much, David, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. So in this talk, what I'd like to do is to talk about how you can connect with your customers and engage in new ways of using AI-powered voice and chatbots. So what I plan to do is to explain how organizations can use bots to engage with customers in new and innovative ways to make things simpler for them, and how this will also allow organizations to benefit by delivering that excellent customer service, which can both improve the customer experience overall and the bottom line. So first off is a little bit of background and some research. So what we've seen is that customer behavior is turning into really what you might expect, that 81%, according to Harvard Business Review, of all customers are attempting to take care of things themselves and basically self-serve, and only reach out to live agents if the need should arise. And on the kind of complementary view of that is Gartner is also saying that customer service interactions that start with self-service is increasing from currently about 48% to roughly half of all interactions to 85% in the next 3 years. And out of that 85%, about 64%, or nearly 2/3 of, sorry, that's not out of the 85%, so it's about 2/3 of all interactions will be fully self-served. And about half of those will be handled by chatbots in this same time period. So what's driving this want to self-serve? So customers really, the culture and the behavior is changing. So technology advances are creating these new abilities for people to use and removing barriers. So those smartphones with the web capability and the messaging apps and voice and SMS are all making things simpler for customers. And this is driving that new behavior, which is becoming the norm. So essentially, they're experiencing that immediacy and independence from the technology, and that's what's encouraging them to self-serve. So on the flip side, what that means is for us, we have to look at the customer expectations when we're providing solutions for our customers. And the key thing here is keep it simple to meet their expectations and that behavior that they've become accustomed to. So keeping it simple is really about a few things. Here it's speed, so that expectation of that instant answer like we get with Google, that concept of personalization, so knowing who I am, knowing where I am, that Google is so good at. Having that convenient access, so providing access on channels that customers expect and not forcing them to change channels forcibly or look for changing channels manually. So giving them that access that they expect. Efficiency, so don't make them wait with effortless applications. What I mean there is things like your website or mobile apps, making them as effortless as possible, and chatbots can really help with that. So the general principle here is don't go against the grain. As the customer behavior is that they're doing things more themselves and things are getting easier for them to do, then we have to meet that and not go against the grain. And that doesn't make it easy for us just because it's easy for them. That's really where part of the hard part really is. So I just thought could frame the customer behavior into a few different categories. So when customers engage with an organization, we can sort of group it into three rough kind of categories. There's the research piece where they're really looking to do that research and understand about the company and what you might be offering, researching your products or other things about you. Transact, so they want to actually do transactions and complete those transactions with you and do that self-service. And if they can't get through either of those two, the research and the transaction, then guidance is a key piece of what they would look for, either to help them find the research that they're looking for, get some of those questions answered, help with the transaction, or even help with that transition to an agent to get that live assistance. All right, so we talked a bit here about the customer behavior. So let's talk a bit about the technology and that shift in technology and how it can make engagement simpler. So really what we have here is bots add that intelligence piece. So websites and mobile apps on their own and even typical IVRs are kind of a sort of a dumb self-service in the sense that it's really up to people to know how to use that technology. And the shift to the smart technology is really with bots is that now we can adapt more to how people behave and how people work. So it's really this shift from the tech-literate people to people-literate technology. And so how bots can help with that is in a few different ways. So with directing the customer, so helping to guide them to specific web pages or places to find the information, clicking on links and taking them somewhere, taking them to a page where if you're doing like a profile change or a password reset, it can help with that kind of direction. There's also a guidance element here where bots can help in the sort of non-conversational sense, do that step-by-step guidance of question and answer or just very short inputs in that non-conversational way, which is sort of simpler, might take longer than a conversational approach, but is still possible to to make things less frustrating and help customers along. On the conversational side, that's obviously with voice in particular and the limited interface that voice has traditionally with IVR and those channels. The conversational aspect and being able to take that to a voice provides a huge opportunity, especially since voice is still a dominant space of where interactions happen. Enhancing your website and mobile app, so that's kind of going back to the direction again, so you can direct your customers using a chatbot to different sites or areas within the mobile app. And these are two main areas that we're seeing a lot of activity, and we'll see a couple of examples of that in a moment. Being available across all channels. So what's different a little bit from IVR is that in the past in speech recognition that we had there is that was very much voice-centric. And with bots, we can apply that not just to the voice channels, but also to chat channels, including messaging apps. And so you can really take your bot capability across all your channels, which is really important to get that consistent self-service and not just offer it on some channels, but not others. And then another thing that bots need to do is plan for failure. They need to fail gracefully to live agents and provide enough information to the agent about what it knows about what the customer was intending to do, any kind of guidance or information that from the part that happened within the bot, and take that to the agents to have that transition be essentially as smooth as possible. Okay, so let's get into a few examples. So here we have TD Bank, so this is my bank, and they have a small bot called Clary that they've implemented actually just recently, and it's not very sophisticated. It's sort of that first stage. It's really an FAQ bot. It doesn't do any transactions, and it steers within the mobile app, and it also has some rich elements like these cards or these buttons that you can click on to advance the interaction that you're having with the bot. And it's really the first step. And what this really gives TD, in my opinion, is that ability to see how people are using the bot, and it'll capture everything that you type into it, so they can start to look at what people are attempting to do with it, and then they can adjust the bot and enhance it moving forward. So pretty simple, but still not a bad place to start. So next we have AirAsia as an example, and AirAsia is obviously in Asia. They're a high growth airline focused on low cost, and they have a website customer assistant that's very directed in its approach. It doesn't have any sort of conversational aspect to it, but it does do transactions. You can book a flight with this bot, but you can't really have a conversation with it at all, and you have to follow it step by step. So again, the example here is that it might take longer than a conversational bot, but it's really steering you through each step of the process, which is still quite simple to follow for customers and gets the job done, and offloads some of that volume that they're having to their live agents and having it self-served. Okay, so next is KLM. KLM is a bit different. They're interesting because we're looking here at a different channel. We're looking at Facebook Messenger. And what happened here was after the Icelandic volcano eruption in 2011, they started getting a lot of messages on Facebook Messenger and on the website. And people were looking for updates on their flights and the delays that they were having. So they were notifying people that way. And they really decided to embrace that channel. So they really embraced Facebook Messenger as a channel. And what they were able to do with that was leverage the fact that customers were using this channel and the fact that it was helping them with understanding what customers wanted to do and the context, and they could personalize it for customers, so showing you whether your flight's delayed or if you haven't checked in, that it can know that and present you with the check-in option. that you can then follow and do that. So it's got both the transaction side and some of that directed capability. And there's also some rich elements here. It uses cards and some graphics ability to make it easier to read and navigate. And what's interesting with KLM is that this was successful enough that 15% of all boarding passes now that they issue are issued through Facebook Messenger. So for most of us, we're used to getting an email from an airline or maybe an SMS as our options, or printing it out. And here we have KLM adopting another channel, and they're getting some significant mileage out of that we're not really seeing with some other organizations or other airlines. Okay, well, I think we're going to interrupt some of the samples here with a poll question, and then we'll carry on to a couple more examples.
Great. Yeah, before I jump into the poll question, can you clarify on that KLM example? You said there was a certain percentage of boarding passes coming through Messenger. Did you say 15, 15?
15%, yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, simple poll question today, folks. When are you planning to implement a chatbot? It's pretty clear we're headed down this path. Some of you are in the early stage just looking at it. Some of you are implementing it now. Some of you are kind of working through some of the challenges. So please give us your best estimate of where you stand, and then we'll play that back to you all when we get near the end of the slides before we get into Q&A. So I'm going to leave that up and running for a while, Noel, and I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, David. Okay, well, let's continue with a couple more examples. So this one here is Google Assistant. And it's really interesting, I think, because of the conversational aspect, which Google is really getting quite known for with Google Assistant and even with Google Home. And really that conversational aspect, what it does is allows you to use completely different language to essentially say the same thing. So when I was in Phoenix at the Executive Summit, I asked Google Assistant to give me directions to the airport. It could already take that personalization aspect of knowing my location, so that's the starting point. It knows I want to get to the airport. It knows I'm in Phoenix. So it takes all that information and immediately presents me with directions on how to get to the airport. So that's really kind of that power of the personalization and the conversational aspect, and really making things simple when you're conversing with a bot. The other thing that's interesting with Google is that you can kind of treat it like a channel. Amazon has this too with Alexa, and you can add sort of your own business app to it. And on the right-hand side, I have a very simple example. I just happened to try and see if United had an app connected to Google Assistant, and it's very limited what they have. So I said, hey, Google, talk to United Airlines. And United Airlines actually responds and just gives me directions to their phone number or their website, essentially. But this is actually coming from United. This is not coming from Google. So they do have a little bit of a stub kind of application where United Airlines is actually responding if I ask something from United Airlines through Google Assistant. And so this is another channel, essentially, that you can plug into and enable bots with. Okay, so the last example I have is GoDaddy, which is a recent one I've come across. They've also tried to take a conversational approach in what they do, and they do things also like use some of these rich elements like buttons and things like that. But what's really interesting with GoDaddy, I think, is that they've really kind of moved to a three-bot kind of model, or multiple bot kind of model. They have three separate bot agents, essentially, that they use. The first is sort of a triage bot, which is that one that'll try and guide customers and understand what it is that they're looking for, and could hand that off to another bot or to a live agent. The other bot that they have, another bot that they have, they call the support bot. It's really kind of an FAQ bot that helps customers with getting answers to their questions. And the third bot they're using is actually a survey bot. So in this example, on the first screen, it's really just the triage bot. It's coming back to me and saying that you can connect with a live agent either through chat or through calling them, and gives me roughly what the estimated wait time is. And on the next screen, it's a little bit different. I'm actually asking a question that it now reacts to and says, hey, I might have an answer to this. And so the bottom two buttons there says call us, and the wait time is about 10 minutes. But then it says you can see the steps here. So this is more about the FAQ bot that's responding. So there's kind of a fork in the road here, that within these two buttons, I'm actually either going to use the triage bot to navigate me to a queue and waiting to talk to an agent, or the second button is I'm going to engage with the FAQ bot. So with engaging on the FAQ bot, then what we have is, it's very simple. It's just sending me a link or giving me a link to their website with the price comparison of their different plans that they have. But it still shows that this FAQ, this response, is actually coming from a different bot. And then at the end of that, it's actually saying with the did this help, it's actually the survey bot that's now kicking in and asking if this helped. But really what happens with these three different bots, the challenge when you've got these different types of bots is how to connect them all together so that you're not losing context when you're moving from one bot to another. So that's a challenge that they took on and that they overcame, and that's how they're able to use the three-bot model. And so they've got about an 80% accuracy, and it's growing, and about 20% of customers are now experiencing chatbots. So that's been also steadily increasing. So it's actually a pretty good uptick in the rate of usage of these bots. Okay, so we just looked at some examples of bots and how you can make things simpler using bots. So let's look a little bit now on the technology side, specifically in some of the benefits. So chatbots, you probably know, and I've already been using these terms here, chatbot and even VCA a little bit. These are many different types of names you can give your bots. And chatbot is kind of an umbrella term. And a virtual customer assistant is really around what you have as your organization to support your customer, and it really includes that AI capability. But there are also virtual personal assistants that are created by the digital giants. We just saw Google Assistant, a little bit in action there. Google Home, Amazon has Alexa, Microsoft has Cortana, and Apple Home. So these are all personal assistants that these digital giants have. So the key thing I really want to get to here is that the digital giants, and Google in particular, probably Amazon next, are really heavily investing in AI. And really these digital giants are viewing these personal assistants like the next iOS versus Android kind of fight that's going on. So the level of progress and the level of capability is really quite astounding, and I think the domination is going to be pretty clear over the next year or so. And so with this, these companies, while they've got their personal assistants and they're quite general, they've also, some of them have a focus in specialty areas around contact center. So Amazon, for example, has a LexBot that you can connect into its Amazon Connect platform for contact centers, and Google has what it calls Contact Center AI, or CCAI, and that allows for connection to multiple vendors, multiple contact center platforms, such as Genesys, amongst others. And Google's also doing other things, like you can use their bot technology to do web crawling. So look at your FAQ website, if you have one, to auto-generate an FAQ bot. They're also looking at how to make that problem of managing context if you have multiple bots. So they're coming out with some capability to make that easier and less code required. And Google is also expected to launch a bot listener. So what that bot listener really is listening to both parties in the conversation and dynamically understanding and adjusting to what's being said, and learning from that so it can be plugged into systems to help with that next best action capability. And there's integration for this in systems like Salesforce and also for Genesis as well. Okay, so on the AI power, the piece here I'm trying to get at with bots is that breadth and the depth. So breadth really gets to the fact that we can address bots across multiple channels, and the depth really means that we can go after those more complex interactions and tasks that we're trying to solve for our customers. And so the AI piece behind the bots is really making that stand out. On the benefit side, often the focus for bots is on cost reduction, but it can quickly turn into it really being about improving the customer experience. If you do the bots right, you're essentially simplifying the experience for customers, and that by default really drives your customer experience improvement. And so what some companies are finding is that they're really getting that CX improvement, and really that's probably where the focus should be. In a lot of cases, focus on that, and you'll get cost savings by making things simpler, but you'll also get things like the ability to increase your revenue through cross-selling and upsell because your CX score is higher. Okay, so typical challenges. So what are some of the problems that we've seen? Well, underestimating the effort is probably the biggest one. Underestimating effort, GoDaddy is a good example of this. They first tried a single bot before going to their 3-bot model. They thought they would have things up and running in a few months, and it took them well over a year before they got it customer-facing and scaling up. So that's one of the first areas. Not having a good data set can be a problem. So if you don't have a good source and way to figure out what customers are trying to get from you and how they want to engage and where the bot should focus, then that can be a problem. Taking on too complex self-service, so that really is biting off more than you can chew. That can be a problem if you've got too many utterances that you're trying to capture, having to work with, or too many intents, as they're called. So trying to figure out what customers are intending, and also back-end integration and things like that can really cause a level of complexity that can be a problem for bots to succeed. And some of that back-end complexity really goes into siloed systems and siloed knowledge. So if those systems are siloed, then that provides some limitations or a higher level of complexity for integration or finding the information that you need. And then chatbots as an island. So this goes back to that cost focus. So what's happened is that a lot of chatbots, it seems, have been implemented with a cost focus, and so they've sort of forgotten about the handoff to the agent in case of failure, or sort of bypassing. So it's kind of like that hiding the zero in the old IVR days. And so that's very frustrating, and even more frustrating for customers now than it was back then, because really it forces customers to go look for and figure out what that other channel is if the chatbot isn't working. So it really needs to make sure that that's in place. So, oops, I think I went too far. So just a quick slide I thought might be useful around the typical people, process, technology silo discussion. So really bots at the top are really trying to help with those tasks or processes, but the silos can kind of be categorized in a couple of different ways. Typically on the people side, if you've got departments that don't really work well together or are kind of siloed and have just elements of the task that they each do, then that can cause siloed problems for bots and for understanding what the process should be in front of a customer. And on the technology side, sometimes those department silos actually have led to technology selection in isolation, which causes technology silos, or you might have technology silos due to mergers and acquisitions or other reasons, and they on their own have create these different systems that bots then have to tie together. So just kind of that triangle of the people, process, technology, and the effect on bots. All right, so let's look at some guidance here and some things on how to implement chatbots. So really, where do you start? What's the right place to start? Kind of hard to maybe venture too far in a general conversation like this, but here are a few ideas. I mean, you could start with a triage or a concierge bot that steers calls, that gives you that ability to capture what customers might be asking. So look at those utterances. So even though it's not doing all that much, you could use it even simply to steer and start to learn from your customer base. You could also start with an FAQ bot. If you have a good knowledge source or FAQ site, you could start there. Or you can focus on specialized areas such as, say, password resets or payments, that sort of thing. On the channel side, you could start with a chat channel, use something like web chat. It's usually easier than voice to implement because you don't have that extra step of AI to convert the voice to text. But it will require that you have chat-capable agents for the handoff, so let's not forget about that. So that should be in place before you do that. And also, if you have those chat-enabled agents, there are ways that you could even use some of these chatbots to let your agents engage with the chatbots first to do some of these things like, say, password resets or issue payment, and allow that learning to happen. Besides chat, you could look at voice. Voice is more difficult, but generally with voice you have the higher volumes. So there can be a higher impact and greater benefit over time if you choose that channel. So then again, I think with the silos, it's really, in this stage, it's understanding with your organization where the silos are and what the impact is that it could have to the selection of where to start. And then it's also looking at these three sort of types of bots that you have or that you could create, and then looking at the orchestration and making sure that there's a code and a solution where you're orchestrating these bots, that they're working together and maintaining the context as you go forward. So with the 3-bot model, just kind of look at it a little bit more detail, is that you have the triage bot, you have the support or the FAQ bots, you might have specialist bots. It's not to say that you're going to have just 3 bots, it's that there could be a multitude of bots that you might have, but in these categories roughly, and that the orchestration is really that you're trying to make them all work together. So a customer could come in through the triage bot, could come into a specialist bot, maybe for something like booking of a hotel or a flight or something like that. And then it might actually then be handed off to another specialist bot, say for payment and for the payment handling. And you want to make sure that through sort of that orchestration that the context is maintained, so that if there's information when they were booking that flight or that hotel room, that when they go to the payment, that information flows smoothly to that other bot, and it can pick up where the customer left off and use some of that previously entered information. And also, of course, with a handoff to the agent, if there's a transfer to the agent, then all that information and understanding of what happened on the bot side has to move and be sent to the agent. Okay, so a couple of last things around some guidance. So on team structure, you're going to want to separate the content writers and the developers. It's important to do that and kind of keep them in their focus. One of the main reasons is that there's a lot of stuff that content writers are going to be doing that doesn't require constant development update. So they'll be doing that curation of FAQs, or looking at utterances and things that get said by people, by customers and trying to improve the accuracy of the matching of what people are saying to the intentions that they're having. So you might want to do that separation. And then in implementing the project itself, you've got a few things that you've got to look at. So first off is, where do you get that initial content? So that initial content, what we've seen in the past is gone to things like QA recordings of the interactions, those customer interactions with agents, as well as sort of finding agents that are good with customers and bringing them into the project. And you can use them sometimes as writers, helping to write the content, or also as testers. You want to also measure, make sure that you're measuring well. So measure the accuracy of the bots, because the inaccuracy really means that you're probably missing utterances, or could even be missing whole intents that you're not capturing and executing on. You want to measure costs, obviously, but also measure those CX-related metrics. So maybe first contact resolution from the bot perspective and customer effort score, and looking to see if you're moving the needle on these things. And lastly is around recommendations. So just to kind of summarize where we've kind of landed here is start small, but keep an eye on all those channels. So you might start on one channel, but really make sure that you remember you're probably going to be bringing your bots across all the channels, or most of the channels that you serve. Listen to your customers. They're going to be the best way that you're going to be able to improve the bot. And what's really interesting with this technology is that you'll be capturing a lot of those utterances. You'll be able to see in writing what people are telling you in the bot, and you can react to that. You can react quite quickly to that as well. Fail forward and learn. So don't be afraid of failure. Like the GoDaddy example, they actually failed a few times. They started with a single bot, junked that approach, created a multi-bot approach, and so they had to go through some iterations to figure out what worked best for them, learn from that. So make sure you measure your outcomes, as we just talked about, and ensure that assisted service is available, that those agents are available, that you can hand off, especially in the chat world. If you've got messaging apps or even SMS as channels that you're using, you want to make sure that you have chat-enabled agents to handle those handoffs. Consider the 3-bot model that I was talking about. See if that works for you. Separate the content writers and the developers, and then just make sure that you understand that there's this constant ongoing change, that really, when you've launched your bot in front of the customers, that's really the beginning of your journey, that your journey has really just started. All right, so there we are. Well, thanks, David.
I'm still taking notes, Noel. I'm still taking notes. I think that last slide was very helpful because it did summarize most of what you covered there, but thank you. Thank you for covering all that in 35 minutes. That was quite remarkable. And I want to remind our audience to use that question box. We have another 10, maybe 15 minutes with Noel today. Noel, we heard you referenced CC&G's Executive Summit. There was certainly a great deal of conversation around this and some other things that I'd like to bring into the conversation as well. And we continue to hear about it at the mid-level manager level, just some concerns and maybe even misunderstandings of how the chatbot will be woven into the overall customer experience. So we'll talk a little bit about that in our Q&A as well. Let me kick things off with our poll question. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We had a really good participation level. And I'll kind of walk through this, Noel, and you tell me if this is kind of where you see this bot shift. You talked about the increase in self-service and chatbots handling more and more of that over time. People literate technology versus technology literate people. So I just wonder if these poll results marry up with what you're seeing. 40% of the folks that answered said they're in the process of evaluating and considering their options, and 20% are working on it now. 20% already have implemented, and 15% are looking down the road. Is that typical what you see?
Yeah, that's actually, I think, that reflects really what we're hearing from Gartner and others, that about 20% implementing it is, might sound low, but with the 40% planning on it, it does sound like it's on the horizon for a lot of people in the near term. So yeah, that actually reflects exactly what the research is saying. Just
let me add to that, just to get your perspective. I just did a quick look at the types of industries that responded, and the ones that kept showing up were insurance, healthcare, utility, and financial banking. Is that also where you're seeing these initial implementations?
Was that kind of in an order, or just kind of what?
No, that's just a quick hit.
Yeah, so banking, definitely we're seeing a lot of changes, and also a lot of levels of sophistication, from just doing a very simple bot to some companies doing very deep AI capabilities, not just in bots, but throughout the whole interaction or transaction process. So banking is definitely, I think, moving along at a pretty good clip. I also think that's because some of the banks, we're seeing some of the new fintech upstarts kicking in, and I think that caused a fair bit of banks to look at that. And it's interesting that I think one of the largest sort of fintech type companies, I think it's Bank of America Mobile. So even the traditional banks kind of have a fintech arm, and so yeah, there's a lot of bot there. Utilities is good to see. Sometimes we don't see very much on the utility side, and then yeah, insurance kind of follows banking, so that makes sense.
One last point here. You referenced in your early example TD Bank, and I believe you said they had an FAQ bot. It wasn't very sophisticated. Is that and again, I know you covered some of this, but is that a typical journey or typical starting point, both inside of financial services or banking, as well as some of these other industries?
Sort of see it maybe a little bit over the map. I think that's a good place to start to get that feedback. I would suspect that they have bigger plans to move into all areas, including self-service. It's interesting because that bot is only on the mobile app. It's not even on their browser, or at least when I did that. So it's very, very narrow. So I'd say that we've seen more banking activity on the website side first, than maybe with the mobile app. So I'd say it's looking a little more conservative in the approach with TD than what we usually see.
All right, well, I'll jump into questions and remind you all on the webinar today, please use that questions box. Comment, question, however you feel you want to engage with Noel, please use that box. We'll kind of get through a few of these here. First one, we already have some chatbots. We have some chatbots already, and these have been built by different teams using different technology. Should we bring them together under one team? And what is the impact of having multiple technologies? You talked about connecting bots, but is this different bot technology? Is that kind of the spirit of this question as you read it?
Yeah, I think if you're using different bot technologies, not just, say, one platform like Google or Amazon, and they've already got bots in place, then you're going back to that sort of orchestration model. You're going to have to, if they're operating as islands today and solving different point problems, you are going to want to bring that up under essentially one kind of at least coordinating team to work through that. And there's a level of orchestration and context management that is going to need to be required. And you can do that. It will be code at that stage if you're using different technology platforms. If you were using the same platform like with Google, then that announcement might help where they'll be reducing the code requirement across multiple bots. So that would pan out. That would help ease that challenge.
Got it. Question came through about the slides. They're attached. Contact information for Noel. We'll let you go through the main channels. There'll be a web and phone follow-up slides here, so hang tight for that. Question, what is a good level of accuracy when it comes to chatbots in order to be considered successful?
Yeah, so I guess you could say it depends. Well, that's a terrible way to start it, but it's really based on some of the situation. So some of the accuracy that you'd want to get to is, I think, over 75, 80%, and then just keep driving from there. And if you start to hit over 80%, then you can, I think, expand what the bots are covering without sort of too much frustration for your customers. And you should be able to achieve, in quite a few circumstances, over 90%. So in one of the customers, we did just a steering bot to very, very much separate the sales calls from the customer service calls. We had an issue where, because some of these customer service calls could actually end up in renegotiating a contract, they treated a lot of these customer service like sales calls and were sending a lot of those calls to sales when really they should have been going to customer service. So we used the bot to try and just ask some very straightforward questions to allow that branch to happen. And we were able to get over 90%. We were targeting 75% accuracy, but we got to the 80s pretty quickly, and then with some tuning got into the 90s. So that should be possible for your bots.
Great. This one's back to our industries. It reads, in the financial industry, who would you say is the most innovative from that you've seen? Maybe we reframe that as to who is innovative. Can you give us some examples or share a little bit about the financial industry's use of chatbots?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I should be picking sides on that. I think I've seen some in the credit card industry. Some of this is, I'm not sure if it's actually hit the street yet, is maybe the main issue, but I've seen that there are sort of maybe call it your upper mid-tier kind of banks that are doing some really solid innovation in the bot space. And I would also say that some large companies, I think Bank of America and I think it's Wells Fargo and others, have actually invested in separate companies, such as I think it's Casisto, that is really focused all around banking, for example. So there are companies that are out there that are maybe funded by and meant to be used by some of the larger banks, and I'm not sure about how accessible that is to some of the others, but kind of maybe dodge that question a little bit. Maybe more one-on-one I can address what I've seen.
Sure, that's a better way to handle it.
Yeah.
And this may dovetail off of that. What differences have you seen based upon an organization's size? So does size matter, and if so, how?
I'm not sure that the size of the organization has really mattered as much as the sort of either the strategic direction or focus, or a focus on customer experience. I think there's a lot of bots that have been put out there that, as I mentioned, that are trying to do things like FAQ or get a bot out there with no handoff to an agent, and some of those I think are not going the right way. So I think it's that's maybe a bit of a strictly cost focus, and they're kind of losing their eye from the overall CX direction, and I think you want to keep your eye on that ball as well as you're doing bots. So I'd say it comes down to your strategy or your customer experience focus. So I'd say there's smaller companies that are very nimble and moving very quickly, and I've actually seen large companies doing the same as well.
All right, this one's talking about converting content. How much is involved in converting content to chat or to chat-friendly responses? And does it require special skills?
Yeah, I think the skills that we've seen there might be if you have access to that content through like an FAQ site or a knowledge base, is say a technical writer type of role can interpret that information and is also used to trying to describe things in a way for other people to consume and read. Some technical writers are better than others. Writing manuals and that sort of thing is not the same thing as conversational. So you do want to look for that sort of language skill as well when you're using people in that role. But yeah, you definitely want to have people who have that ability to understand your industry and convert that to plain language and understand the conversation aspect of language. Then I think, yeah, with the sources, that is a silo issue. Sometimes we've seen just the knowledge bases aren't very, very good. You can actually narrow it. You could, for example, present bots, make them available only on, say, certain pages of your website. Maybe that narrows down what the focus is that you can handle in an FAQ situation, so you're not trying to tackle everything all at once. So that could be a way that you use the context of a certain web page, for example. So yeah, there are ways to accommodate the issues you might have on not having all your knowledge in one system.
Got it. For voice chat, I've found that the voice options are still very robotic. Is this still the case, and how does it affect the customer's view of voice bots?
Yeah, so it's not a great first impression, but what we found is that customers do get used to it or are kind of okay with that. One of the side effects actually is kind of interesting, is that it means that they know they're talking to a bot, and people don't like to typically be hoodwinked. So there have been bots out there that can carry on a conversation well enough. Google's been working on some of these that they're up to 5 minutes or more before you're kind of starting to figure out that there's something a bit fishy. So I think there's an element of openness to that, and the voices are definitely understandable, but it's definitely coming that to switch to an actual actor-like voice that sounds practically human is there in some places. It's there in some of the things like Google Home and Alexa, but that'll work its way into the actual bot platforms as well over time. So we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
Before we let you go, there was a lot of conversation at Exec Summit around this topic, and I'd just like to have you share a few words about voice biometrics.
Voice biometrics, yeah, it's a interesting technology that's getting some definite uptick, especially in the financial industry. I think what that's doing is a couple of key things. It's making things more secure for banking and financial with that sort of voice print model, but at the same time, it's also making things easier. So it's making things easier because customers aren't having to go through that authentication process, and banks in particular can have quite a lengthy authentication process. They might be asking you 4 or so questions before they'll take it to a certain level of change that they'll do to your account. So it really gets rid of a lot of that stuff and makes a big improvement over that hurdle and kind of getting on with business, getting on with the task at hand.
Well, there certainly was a lot of enthusiasm around it, and I'm not sure exactly how far down the road we are in implementation. I know I've got a few financial service companies that I deal with that have that option, Charles Schwab being one of them. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves as well. So we're going to wrap it up there. We've taken enough of your time for one day, and you're very kind with your time, and we greatly appreciate it. I want to also thank the folks that are giving us your feedback and the ratings. Noel usually scores very, very high, and we appreciate you taking a moment to rate that information. You can join CC&G in the conversations like we're having today on LinkedIn and the CC&G group. We'll post additional content there, so take a look at the link attached if you'd like to get involved there. We also want to encourage you to share your this webcast with your colleagues as the recorded version will be made available to you all shortly. And again, as I said before, the slides are attached in the PDF form, so feel free to download those. CCNG.com is evolving. That's all I'm going to say, that you might want to check back there in the next few days. We have a number of upcoming programs and events as we continue to interact with the industry as a whole in various regions, as well as all of you online. So again, as the announcement says here, feel free to send your comments through Twitter, and there are the handles there. So we're going to wrap it up. Noel, again, we really appreciate all that you do for CC&G and our membership and the colleagues and the listeners and the followers and the advocates. You're always making yourself available, and it's always very, very informative. So thank you again for taking time with us today.
All right. Thanks, David. Yeah, happy to help.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
I know.